Hi, Josh. Number one, I'm sorry that old people exist. I'm sorry that they think tipping 10% is a good tip. I am sorry that that's how I was taught, and I thought 10%, that's a good tip, and I always tipped exactly 10%. Until my wife became a server and found out that, 20% was what you're supposed to tip. People who hand out tracts with that impersonally, probably not a great idea. That made you upset? I'd like to say I'm sorry. Number two, information and today and the way people get information is really not all that different. They still hear it, they still commit it to memory, they still interact with information. Someone tells them something, they can learn it. They're not stupid and they have to be glued to some piece of technology. If I say it really passionately, does it make it super true? If I say that tracts don't relate information to people, does it make it really true? And that could be really sarcastic and seem mean, but what I mean to say is maybe the Gideons should stop handing out Bibles, King James. Nobody can relate to that. But I know how powerful the Gideon's witness and ministry is. There's this book called One Thing That You Can't Do in Heaven. If you've never checked it out, I invite you to check out this book. In it, this is written by Mark Cahills, and he is a great evangelist. He hands out tracts all the time. In particularly, there's one story in here about this. He was going to have an evangelization conference for a youth group, and he was asked to help with this youth group. So he goes, sets it up with the youth pastor. They decide they're going to have some time with the kids, tell them how to share the gospel, and then they're going to go to a mall and share the gospel. The lead pastor gets wind of this, and he goes, you can't just be telling people about Jesus like that. You got to have a relationship first. And so they take these youth, they fire Cahill, take these youth out to this wilderness retreat, out, as Cahill puts it, in the middle of nowhere, to a retreat center far away from civilization and any actually lost people, so they could learn how to share their faith. The Sunday afternoon after the retreat, one of the teens decided to go to the mall and witness, and got into a conversation with an Iranian man. The man said, "It's interesting that you're talking with me. One of the reasons I came to America was to find out more about Christianity. Matter of fact, I just bought a Bible yesterday." During the conversation, the teenager asked, "Have you ever been to a Christian church before?" He said, "No." So the teen asked, "Would you like to come next week to my church?" The man said, "That would be great." Isn't it nice to know that this type of witnessing doesn't work? All over in here, he hands out tracts and gospel tracts, and tries to tell people about Jesus. You made an important point that you shouldn't just hand them out as if there's some sort of advertisement. People hate getting that kind of stuff. But if they hate it because it says something about Jesus on it, it's not the tract's fault, and it's not the person who maybe had a good intention to hand out the tract. It's the person who hates the tract being about Jesus. They just hate Jesus, and they're going to have to come around to that. And if they don't, it's really not the person at fault handing out the tract. This guy Mark Cahills has an example of where he went out, handed out, he saw some trash workers every day and thought, man, their job must suck. So he took up $7, wrapped it around a tract, and went out and said, "I'd like to buy you guys lunch today." And years later, he was on a conference on an airplane, and he sees one of these guys come up to him and says, "I know you. You handed out a tract to me before." And they had a great conversation about how it was a great witnessing tool. So I agree that tracts may not always be the best way, but they can be a very effective way, and it's all about how you use them as a tool. The Gideons, maybe you think that a Bible written in King James isn't the best way, but it's how they do it, how they use it, with the intention that they do it with, and I think God uses that. Planting a seed, sharing the gospel. Paul, the disciples, they went and open air preached all the time. How come nobody does that? Because it's not relational, and the currency of today is relationships? I'm sorry, I don't think so. They witnessed to anybody and everybody who would listen to them. They told them, Jesus Christ is risen again. Jesus went around and witnessed to anyone who would listen to him. He didn't first say, let's be friends for a month. Let me live in your town. Get to have a relationship with you because otherwise you aren't going to listen to me. He just met with them where they were at. He saw who they were and he witnessed to them. He told them about his Father. Paul said, I'm a Greek to the Greeks and a Jew to the Jew, a Gentile to the Gentiles. You see who you're witnessing to. You meet them there. And that's how you interact with a person. Reason versus authority versus your own experience. There was this excellent sermon I listened to on West Cohasset Chapel's Bible website. If you Google West Cohasset Chapel, Cohasset, Minnesota, and just go look up the sermon archives, it was Today's Relevant Postmodern World is the title of the sermon. Go look that up because in it he talks about your own experience and the truth of your own experience. And you're right, that's what today's world is looking for. But if I tell you the truth of my own experience, how is that any less valid than the truth of their own experience? In today's postmodern culture, where your experience is king, then you have no reason to listen to any authority. You have no reason to say, yeah, this Jesus message is right. You have no conviction to say, oh, well, I should come around to Christianity. You just say, well, your reason is as good as my reason. You believe what you believe, and I believe what I believe. And let's live in our postmodern world together. As a side note, billboards, I have read profoundly simple things on billboards or signs, and they have affected me because it tied in with a lot of other stuff that was going on. I think that your frustration is probably more with people that you mentioned, old people who go, I did a good job today. I handed out a tract with my meal, and they go tell all their friends at Bible study. And I would say that old person should stop handing out gospel tracts. But if the old person didn't tell a soul about it and thought, I tipped 10% just like my daddy taught me to, and I handed out a gospel tract, and I didn't have time to tell the server a message because he was busy working, and out of their heart and intention it was really honestly a good effort, then how can you criticize a person for something like that? I question, I understand that, there are those who might be proud about it and might say, I witnessed by handing out a gospel tract, and they need to stop doing that. But there's probably people out there who do it, and if people hate that it says Jesus on it, then they hate Jesus. They don't hate that person that handed out that gospel tract. Another point I'd like to say is I hate coffee, and it's super weird when someone invites me to coffee. I think, why? That's weird. I don't like coffee. I don't like going to coffee places. If I invited this guy at work, Nathan, to coffee, he'd be like, okay. That'd be weird. So I think we need to meet that person where they're at. Nathan likes video games. I might ask him if he'd like to come play video games. Talk to a Greek like a Greek. Meet the person where they're at. Talk to a Jew the way you would speak to a Jew. If they're Muslim, speak to them like they're Muslim. I was just witnessing to Nastea at work the other day. She's a Muslim, and we were talking about Jesus. She wasn't mad about it, and that's a good point for your relationship argument. I do think that you need to have a relationship with people sometimes to break through with certain people, but that doesn't mean that other methods of sharing the gospel are ineffective. On that note, and the note I'd like to end with is, what is the gospel? It's that Jesus Christ died, was buried, and rose again on the third day, and that you can have life with Christ. Isn't that the gospel? So if you tell that to someone, why do you need to have a relationship to tell that to someone? Why did the apostles need to have a relationship to tell that to someone? They didn't. They just told them. And if that person rejected the gospel, then they rejected the Son, and the Son will reject them. If that person accepts the gospel, amen. If they don't accept the gospel, then you get blessed for telling them the gospel. 2 Peter 6, I can read it. I'll look it up. I'm sure you can find it just as easily as I can. 1 Peter 4:14. If you are a reproach for the name of Christ, blessed are you, for the Spirit of God and glory rest upon you. On their part he is blasphemed, but on your part he is glorified.